28 years. That's how long I'd been the face RedimTech clients actually trusted. While the company pivoted from startup scrappiness to corporate machinery, I remained the constant. The guy who remembered birthdays, knew about divorces, and understood that million-dollar contracts were built on handshakes. That happened months before the signatures. I started when RedimTech was 15 people crammed into a converted warehouse, back when our biggest client was a regional manufacturer who paid us in quarterly installments because that's all they could manage. I learned their business inside out, visited their plants, met their families at company picnics. My approach was simple: treat clients like partners, not profit centers. When Dataflow Industries faced bankruptcy in 2019, I restructured their payment plan and reduced our fees temporarily. The board called it bleeding heart nonsense. 2 years later, Dataflow's acquisition made them our third largest account. When Coastal Logistics needed emergency system repairs during their peak season, I flew to Houston on Christmas Eve. Other account managers would have charged overtime. I bought their director dinner and fixed it myself. The oldies liked it. But as RedimTech grew, hired MBA, and brought in venture capital, my methods started looking antiquated. Relationship-based selling is dead, the new VP of sales declared in quarterly meetings. We need aggressive growth strategies and hard closes. I nodded politely and kept doing what worked. The meeting happened on a Tuesday. I walked into the conference room expecting the usual quarterly review, but instead found VP Harrison, HR Director Thompson, and my direct manager, Collins, ranged like a tribunal. "James, we need to discuss your performance trajectory," Harrison began, sliding a folder across the polished table. "Your numbers are adequate, but your methods are increasingly misaligned with our strategic direction." I opened the folder. Performance metrics, client retention rates, revenue per account, all solid, some exceptional. "These look pretty good to me," I said carefully. "They're soft numbers," Harrison continued. "You're too comfortable, too accommodating. Our research shows clients respond better to urgency, scarcity, pressure tactics. We need hard closers now, not relationship managers who take clients to lunch and remember their kids' names." Collins, who'd worked under me for 5 years, wouldn't meet my eyes. Thompson shuffled papers nervously. "What exactly are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. "We're restructuring the sales division. Your position is being eliminated. We'll offer you a generous severance package, of course, considering your tenure." The word tenure came out like an accusation. I sat there for a moment, processing 28 years of loyalty being dismissed as outdated sentimentality. "I see," I said finally, "and my clients will be transitioned to our new team. Don't worry, they're professionals." I walked out without another word. Cleaning out my office took longer than expected. 28 years accumulates. Thank you cards from clients, photos from company retreats, awards that now felt like archaeological artifacts. But as I packed, I started noticing things. The new hard closers Harrison bragged about, I'd heard. The calls through thin office walls, high-pressure tactics, aggressive upsling, treating long-term partners like marks to be worked. Michelle Turner from Dataflow had mentioned feeling pressured during our last conversation. I'd brushed it off. Now it made sense. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through recent client interactions. Complaints buried in casual conversations, concerns dismissed as adjustment periods. The new team wasn't just changing tactics, they were burning bridges I'd spent decades building. That evening, I sat in my home office staring at my client contact list. These weren't just accounts to me. David Chen at Coastal Logistics had invited me to his daughter's wedding. Margaret O'Brien from Dataflow sent Christmas cards. Thomas Wright at the regional manufacturer still called me for advice even on non-RedimTech matters. What would they think when some aggressive stranger started demanding contract amendments and pushing unnecessary upgrades? I opened my laptop and began researching non-compete clauses in my severance package. The language was restrictive, but not ironclad. I couldn't directly solicit RedimTech clients, but I couldn't control who contacted me. My phone buzzed. Text, message from David at Coastal. "James, got a weird call from your company today. Some guy named Brooks was really pushy about expanding our contract. Thought you should know." Then another, from Margaret. "Is everything okay at RedimTech? New Reps seemed to think our current arrangement wasn't optimal for us. Very different tone than usual. I stared at the messages, feeling something shift inside me. The next morning, I met my former colleague Sandra Rodriguez at Café Luna, a place we'd grabbed coffee countless times over the years. Sandra had survived 3 reorganizations and knew where all the bodies were buried. They're calling it sales optimization, she said, stirring her latte with unnecessary force. Harrison brought in this consultant, some hotshot from a competitor who's supposed to revolutionize our client engagement model. What's that mean in English? Pressure tactics, manufactured urgency, contract restructuring that favors RedimTech heavily. They're targeting your biggest accounts first. She leaned forward. James, they're going to destroy relationships you spent decades building. David at Coastal already called, asking what happened to you. I'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. There's more. Sandra continued. The new team doesn't understand the history. Brooks tried to push a service upgrade on Dataflow that Margaret explicitly rejected 2 years ago for valid technical reasons. When she explained why it wouldn't work, he accused her of not understanding her own infrastructure. Christ, it gets worse. They're implementing something called controlled scarcity, artificially limiting availability of services to create pressure for immediate decisions. Remember how you always made sure Coastal had priority access during their peak season? That's gone. Now they have to compete with everyone else and pay premium rates for what used to be standard service. Sandra pulled out her phone and showed me an internal email. Look at this. Previous relationship-based pricing models are being eliminated. All clients will be migrated to standard rate structures. Within 90 days, no exceptions for legacy arrangements. My blood ran cold. 3 of my major clients had special arrangements negotiated during difficult periods, structured to help them grow, designed to be mutually beneficial long-term investments. Eliminating those arrangements would cost them hundreds of thousands annually. They don't understand, I said quietly. Those aren't just discounts. They're strategic partnerships. Harrison doesn't care about strategy. He cares about quarterly numbers. And frankly, James, some people are saying you were too soft, that maybe it's time for a harder approach. I looked at Sandra carefully. We'd worked together for 15 years, but corporate politics made everyone cautious. What do you think? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I think you built something beautiful, and they're about to burn it down for short-term gains. And I think when it all falls apart, they'll blame you for not preparing them properly. My phone buzzed again. Another text from David. James, can we talk? This Brooks character is something else. The calls started coming that evening. First David from Coastal, then Margaret from Dataflow, then Thomas from the manufacturer. All the same story: aggressive new representatives, pressure tactics, threats of service limitations, demands for immediate contract restructuring. James, what the hell is happening over there? David's voice was tight with frustration. This Brooks guy called 3 times today. Threatened to put us on a standard service tier if we don't upgrade our contract by Friday. Standard tier? We've been premium clients for 15 years. I explained the situation as diplomatically as possible, but David cut me off. So they fired you and replaced you with some shark who's trying to shake us down? After everything we've built together? He paused. You know what this means, right? We're not just clients to you, we're partners. If RedimTech doesn't understand that, maybe we need to find someone who does. The conversation with Margaret was equally tense. Brooks had not only pushed the unsuitable service upgrade, but had questioned her technical competence when she objected. In 23 years of business, no vendor has ever spoken to me that way, she said. Her voice icy. I don't care how good RedimTech's technology is. I won't be treated like an idiot by some kid who doesn't understand our industry. Thomas was the most diplomatic, but his message was clear. James, you know we value stability and long-term relationships. This new approach feels very transactional. We're going to have to evaluate our options. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo, technically unemployed, but fielding more calls from upset clients than I had during most working weeks. Each conversation followed the same pattern: confusion about my departure, anger about the new tactics, subtle inquiries about alternatives. The irony wasn't lost on me. RedimTech had eliminated my position because they thought I was too soft, but now the relationships I'd built were the only thing standing between them. And a client exodus. I knew I couldn't directly solicit RedimTech clients, the non-compete was clear on that, but I also couldn't ignore friends who were calling for advice. The ethical line was thin and getting thinner with each frustrated call. Then Sandra called with news that changed everything. "James, you need to know this. Harrison is blaming the client pushback on you. He's telling the board that you poisoned the well with excessive accommodation, and that the new team is just correcting years of revenue leakage from your soft approach. That's insane. It's also working. Half the board thinks you sabotaged client relationships to make yourself look indispensable. They're talking about pursuing legal action if any clients leave." I sat in stunned silence. 28 years of loyalty, and they were going to make me the scapegoat for their own incompetence. "There's more," Sandra continued. "Brooks screwed up the Coastal account worse than we thought. David asked for a technical consultation on expanding their logistics software, and Brooks sold him a completely different service that won't integrate with their existing systems. The implementation team just discovered it this morning. The whole project has to be scrapped. How much did that cost them? To $100,000 in lost time and preparation. David is furious. He's demanding Brooks be removed from his account immediately, and Harrison's response, double down. He's standing by Brooks and telling David that RedimTech's new business model requires mutual accountability from both parties. I closed my eyes. They weren't just burning bridges, they were salting the earth. Turning point, revelation that night. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David's wedding invitation, still pinned to my home office bulletin board. Margaret's Christmas cards, accumulated over years of genuine friendship. Thomas Wright, who'd called me for advice on business decisions that had nothing to do with RedimTech. These weren't just professional relationships. They were trust built over decades, respect earned through consistency and reliability. Harrison saw them as weakness, but I finally understood what they really were. My reputation made manifest. I'd been thinking about this all wrong. The question wasn't whether I could compete with RedimTech. It was whether RedimTech could survive without the relationships that had sustained it. Through multiple market downturns and industry changes, around 3 a.m., I opened my laptop and began researching something I'd never seriously considered, starting my own consultancy. The technology sector was complex enough that clients needed advocates, not just vendors. Companies that understood their business, respected their constraints, and built solutions around their actual needs rather than quarterly sales targets. I pulled up my contact list again, but this time I wasn't looking at RedimTech clients. I was looking at former colleagues who'd left over the years, talented people who'd grown frustrated with corporate politics and aggressive sales cultures, people who understood that sustainable business was built on trust, not pressure. My phone rang. David from Coastal, calling at 3:17 a.m. "James, I hope I didn't wake you, but I've been thinking about our conversation. This whole situation with RedimTech is unacceptable, and I wanted you to know we're going to terminate our contract." "David, that's a big decision. Maybe you should know it's not just about Brooks or the new approach. It's about respect. When they fired you, they fired the relationship that made RedimTech valuable to us. Everything else is just technology, and technology is replaceable." He paused, and I could hear him choosing his words carefully. "I'm not asking you to violate any agreements, but if you were ever in a position to provide the kind of service we've come to expect, well, we'd be very interested in having that conversation." After he hung up, I sat staring at my laptop screen. I'd spent 28 years building something that transcended any single company. The question was whether I had the courage to bet everything on relationships over corporate security. I opened a new document and began typing. McCannon Consulting. Services, strategic technology partnerships built on trust. The name came naturally. My middle name, my mother's maiden name, had always felt more like me than the corporate persona I'd maintained for nearly 3 decades. By dawn, I had a basic business plan, a target client list that carefully avoided any direct solicitation, and 3 former RedimTech colleagues, who'd responded enthusiastically to my carefully worded for AM emails about potential opportunities in client relationship management. Sandra called at 7:30 a.m., her voice tight with urgency. "James, you need to know this. Margaret from Dataflow just terminated their contract, effective immediately." She cited fundamental changes in service philosophy and specifically mentioned Brooks' behavior as unprofessional and disrespectful. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. "How's Harrison taking it?" "He's in full damage control mode. Called an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Word is, he's going to blame client turnover on legacy relationship dependencies and recommend accelerating the transition to their new model. Double down again." "Exactly. But James, there's something else." Thomas Wright from the manufacturer called this morning asking about your severance terms, specifically whether you're restricted from consulting work. My heart started racing. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I transferred him to HR, but the implication was pretty clear. He's exploring options." I hung up and stared at my laptop screen, cursor blinking in the empty business plan document. 3 major clients expressing interest, a framework for legitimate competition, and a former employer so focused on proving they were right that they couldn't see the cliff they were walking toward. The irony was perfect. They'd called me too soft, but the relationships they dismissed as weakness were about to become the foundation of their strongest competition. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after my termination meeting. David from Coastal, his voice quiet but determined. "James, I need to tell you something. We've made a decision about Redimtech, and we wanted you to hear it first. We're terminating our contract tomorrow morning. After 15 years, it's over." I took a careful breath. "David, that's a significant decision. Are you sure you've considered all the implications?" "We've been considering them all week. The final straw was this afternoon. Brooks called demanding we sign an amended contract with a 40% rate increase by Friday, or they'd move us to standard service levels. No negotiation, no discussion of our history or the value we bring as a long-term partner. Just ultimatums. I'm sorry it came to that. Don't be sorry, be ready." Because Margaret at Dataflow made the same decision yesterday, and I suspect Thomas at the manufacturer won't be far behind. We're not just walking away from Redimtech, we're walking towards something better. He paused, and I could hear him taking a breath. "McCannon Consulting, nice name. When can we schedule our first meeting?" My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and pulled up the business plan. I'd been refining for a week. "David, I need to be very clear about something. I can't and won't violate my non-compete agreement. If you're ending your relationship with Redimtech, that has to be your decision based on your business needs. Not any solicitation from me, understood? But once that relationship is terminated, we're free to explore alternatives, and you're free to compete in the open market." "Yes, then, let's schedule a meeting for next Monday. I'll bring our technical specifications and current pain points. You bring whatever solutions you think might work." After David hung up, I sat in my home office surrounded by boxes of Redimtech memorabilia and felt something I hadn't experienced in years, pure excitement about work. Not the grinding satisfaction of meeting quarterly targets, but the genuine thrill of building something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Emergency board meeting ended an hour ago. 3 resignations from the sales team. Harrison is blaming industrial sabotage and talking about hiring private investigators. Thought you should know." Then another text, this one from Margaret at Dataflow. "James, our legal team confirmed we're clear to explore new partnerships as of tomorrow. Would McCannon Consulting be available for a strategy session this week?" And finally, Thomas from the manufacturer. "Young man, I've been in business for 43 years, and I know the difference between a vendor and a partner. Redimtech seems to have forgotten that distinction. Are you available for lunch Thursday?" I opened a new spreadsheet and began calculating. 3 major clients, representing approximately $30 million in annual revenue. Average consulting margins versus Redimtech's overhead structure. Staffing requirements for the kind of personalized service these clients expected. The numbers were staggering. Not just profitable-transformational. My phone rang again. This time it was Collins. My former manager, his voice strained. James, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest. Are you actively soliciting RedimTech clients? No, I said simply. I'm not. Then how do you explain 3 major accounts terminating contracts in the same week you were let go? I'd explain it the same way I explained it in performance reviews for the past 5 years, relatio. And ships matter. When you treat partners like profit centers, they stop being partners. There was a long silence. Harrison wants to pursue legal action. Claims you've violated the spirit of your non-compete even if you haven't violated the letter. Let him try. I've been careful to document every interaction. But Collins, can I ask you something? Do you really think aggressive sales tactics were going to work with clients like David and Margaret? People who value stability and long-term relationships. Another silence. No, he said quietly. I don't. But Harrison was convinced your approach was holding us back. And now we've lost $30 million in annual revenue in 1 week. And the board is asking very pointed questions about our client retention strategy. 6 months later, I sat in the conference room of my new office, a converted loft space that felt more like a comfortable living room than a corporate headquarters, reviewing quarterly reports with my small but exceptional team. McCannon Consulting had grown to 12 employees, all former RedimTech colleagues who'd left during the post-purge exodus. Our client base included not just the 3 original accounts that had followed me, but 8 additional companies who'd been referred by satisfied partners. The irony wasn't lost on me. RedimTech's hard closer approach had generated more business for my consultancy than any marketing campaign could have achieved. Word spread quickly in the industry. If you wanted technology solutions built around your actual needs, rather than vendor sales targets, McCannon was the place to go. Sandra knocked on my door, holding a printed email with a slight smile. You need to see this, she said, handing me the printout. It's from Harrison. The email was brief and professional. James, I hope this message finds you well. RedimTech is currently reevaluating our client engagement strategies, and I'd like to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Would you be available for lunch next week? I looked up at Sandra, who was trying not to laugh. Collaboration opportunities. Translation: they want to hire us as consultants to repair the relationships they destroyed. And our response: I thought you might want to handle this one personally. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the city skyline. 28 years at RedimTech had taught me the value of professionalism, even in difficult circumstances. Schedule the lunch, I said finally, but make sure he understands our consulting rates. And Sandra, make sure he knows that our approach is built around long-term relationships and mutual respect. If he's looking for quick fixes or aggressive tactics, we're not the right fit. She grinned. I'll be sure to mention that our philosophy is probably too soft for their current strategic direction. That evening, I called David at Coastal to update him on our progress with his logistics expansion project. Not because I had to, but because after 18 months of working together in this new capacity, it felt natural to check in on both the technical details and his daughter's college plans. James, he said toward the end of our conversation, can I tell you something? This past year working with McCannon has reminded me why I got into business in the first place. It's not just about the technology or even the results, it's about working with people who give a damn. After hanging up, I walked through our small office, past the awards from grateful clients, the thank you cards, the photos from company events that felt more like family gatherings than corporate functions. 20-8 years ago, I'd learned that business was built on relationships. RedimTech had tried to teach me that relationships were a weakness to be optimized away. They were wrong, and the empty boardroom where they'd announced my termination had finally fallen silent. For all the right reasons, my phone buzzed with a text from Thomas at the manufacturer. James, the wife wants to know if you and your team are free for Sunday dinner next week. She's making her famous pot roast. I smiled and typed back, we'd be honored. Some things, I thought, were worth being soft about.